In this video, we'll be exploring the top 6 mistakes that people suffering from irritable bowel syndrome make and how to avoid them. We will review some of my recent personal experience working with IBS patients and how they can handle their condition properly. Useful info, so stick around. Hi, I'm Dr. Chanu Dasari, a surgeon who specializes in reversing inflammation caused by gut microbiome dysfunction. My approach, called the Mind-Gut Immunity Method, has helped thousands of patients overcome autoimmune disease and digestive dysfunction. We can fix complex and severe conditions without medication. This includes autoimmune inflammation and digestive dysfunction. If you want to see how we do it, and to see our actual success stories, check out the link in the description or visit mgiclinic.com to request a discovery call. Now this talk will be focused primarily on irritable bowel syndrome. And as you know, I've had many people with IBS over the years reverse their symptoms and overcome inflammation without the use of medications. But what makes these people special? Because many times when you go to the doctor, you hear that IBS or SIBO or Candida cannot be cured. In fact, they may just offer you some tests and some medications and that's it. I can tell you from my own personal experience dealing with digestive disease that I was told a lot of the same things that were simply not true. So in this video, I want to focus in on some of the biggest mistakes people make when they listen to the wrong advice for irritable bowel syndrome, and hopefully give you some perspective on how to achieve uncommon healing from irritable bowel syndrome and reverse IBS symptoms for good. Alright, what are the top 6 mistakes to avoid when you're dealing with irritable bowel syndrome? Number 1, ignoring bowel movements. As you may be aware, 70 to 80% of the immune system is contained in the gut. It's called mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, or MALT for short, and it covers practically the entire digestive tract. There is additional immune tissue in the spleen and the liver, and even the mouth and the upper airways have significant contributions. Typically, when we see inflammation that can affect the entire body, whether it's the skin, the joints, nerves, thyroid, bowel, salivary glands, all of this inflammation, including symptoms such as fatigue, brain fog, dry eye, pain, all of this inflammation originates and can get triggered from the GI tract. The end organ that gets affected may be the brain, the joints, liver, eyes, salivary gland, nerves, skin, thyroid, or whatever, and that's related to the specific disease. So the end organ can be different, but a pattern I tend to see is that the inflammation starts in the GI tract. And this has been found to be true in various research studies. There's a famous effort underway called the American Gut Project. It's a precision nutrition and precision medicine project that is being conducted at some top-level university hospitals, including University of California and San Diego. They're able to predict the level of inflammation in the body, including when somebody experiences exacerbation of symptoms. They're able to predict this when it happens based on the stool that someone produces. They basically analyze the poop to figure out, is this person about to develop worsening inflammation in the next several days to weeks? Which is all fascinating stuff to be able to predict what's going on several days in advance based just on what your stool shows. So what does this mean for you? In general, when you're dealing with high amounts of inflammation in your body, it has a lot to do with what's going on in your gut, specifically which types of bacteria are in your gut, how they digest food, and how long these bacteria and their waste products remain in the intestines before exiting. So how does this play out? Well, for one, it's important to have frequent regular bowel movements. This seems obvious, but for most people I work with, this is a challenge. They don't go every day, or if they do, they certainly do not empty all the way. And this can be a problem. Second, it's important for the gut microbiome to be optimized from a species standpoint. I interpret a lot of advanced stool tests that look at the various populations of bacteria in their gut and funguses like Candida. We also look at the bacterial metabolites such as methane, which you can see in SIBO or IMO. We also look at chemicals such as zonulin, which you can see in leaky gut. All of this data suggests that there is an overarching gut microbiome dysfunction, and it's very important to introduce new, healthier species to the system regularly and frequently to compete with the harmful microbes. Now, it's my firm belief that if you conduct this type of advanced functional testing of the GI tract, if you do this type of testing when you're inflamed, everything turns out to be positive. But if you repeat the test when the inflammation has resolved, it tends to fall more in line with the normal range. One limitation is that when you're inflamed, let's say you get all these advanced GI tests and you don't know where to focus your attention. You may get obsessed with killing off Candida or ridding SIBO with antibiotics or trying to fix leaky gut by using a bunch of supplements. But if you think about it, the main issue is not having regular bowel movements. And if you don't fix this underlying issue, this condition will return and can specifically cause autoimmune inflammation. In addition to bowel movements, it becomes paramount that the diet helps support healthy microbial colonies and does not offset the balance of good versus bad microbes. The intestinal system contains an ever-changing milieu of bacteria, funguses, and viruses. Some of these bacteria produce methane, such as in the case in IMO SIBO. The specific subtype of bacteria is called archaeobacteria. Some of these bacteria also respond to antibiotics, while others do not. Sometimes even healthy bacteria can be killed off by certain antibiotics. And that's why you get conditions such as C. difficile colitis. C. diff is when you have an overgrowth of Clostridium bacteria in the GI tract. And the reason this is important is the Clostridium lays down a biofilm that prevents other good bacteria from growing in its place. So when you get this condition, it can be particularly challenging to get rid of if you don't know what you're doing. The same is true for Candida overgrowth. Sometimes you can have funguses that just take over and cause high amounts of histamine production. Here you see allergies, hives, brain fog, bloating. You can also see changes in the skin and the nails in addition to allergy symptoms such as postnasal drip and dry eye. It turns out certain bacteria can also cause a spike in histamine levels, and this is based on the type of diet that you're eating, but also the type of bacteria that's in there and how long it's sitting there. Still on this topic, one aspect that still gets ignored are viruses. A lot of you probably know that viruses can infect human cells. But did you know that they can also affect bacteria? Viruses are capable of injecting their genetic code into bacteria directly and can contribute to the virulence of certain bacterial strains. They can also contribute genes that produce resistance to certain antibiotics. So funguses, bacteria, and viruses all contribute to the human microbiome. And these microbes have their own genes and their own metabolism and their own growth patterns that can either support the human body or sometimes harm it. And it's important to know that the waste products of fermentation, histamine, biofilms can all cause damage to the intestines and activate the immune system, causing inflammation elsewhere in the body. So given these challenges, diet can play a major role in keeping certain beneficial microbes supported. Number 2, too much sugar and processed foods. So I get this question a lot, especially in the comments section of my videos. I hear about how people have eliminated sugar and processed foods in their diet, and that was enough to reverse their symptoms permanently. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's several reasons why sugar and processed foods wreak havoc in the body. For one, they create gut microbiome dysfunction. The sugar and the chemicals produce overgrowth of harmful bacteria in the gastrointestinal system and upper airways. The result is that normal metabolism is negatively affected. For example, the metabolism of fatty acids in the presence of sugar creates harmful cholesterol derivatives like arachidonic acid and oxidizes tissue. Sugar and processed foods also increase the presence of a reactive oxygen species and activate enzymes such as fatty acid synthase, hormone-sensitive lipase, and peroxisome proliferator activating receptor gamma, which can be further dysregulated by the consumption of processed foods. In addition, bacterial and fungus overgrowth due to sugar is a major and significant trigger of histamine production in the body, like I said earlier. Excessive sugar intake can also activate pro-inflammatory pathways, such as NF-kappa beta, triggering the release of even more inflammatory cytokines. You may also remember from my other lectures that upon ingesting certain chemical additives, the body can generate reactive oxygen species that cause damage to cellular structures such as lipids, proteins, and DNA. The affected biochemical pathways also include the activations of pro-oxidant enzymes such as NADPH oxidase and xanthine oxidase, and the inhibition of naturally protective antioxidants in the body, such as superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase. All this means is that excessive sugar and processed foods can cause harm and damage to tissues and severely limit natural repair mechanisms. Now, you're probably wondering, why not everyone? Why can some people consume carbs, sugars, and processed foods and have absolutely no problem? And the answer is because they're not inflamed. When the body does not have active inflammation, it can normally handle these types of foods. Kids are a really good example of this. Assuming they don't have any type of inflammatory disease, kids can consume large amounts of processed foods, carbs, sugars, whatever, and they'll be fine. They may just be a bit hyperactive and then crash, but they don't have the same kind of rip-roaring inflammation as some people who have active immune inflammation. And even in my clinic, when people recover from their inflammatory diseases and they have been symptom-free for several months, they can go back to eating some foods because the body is not triggered and it can handle these foods without an issue. But when you are inflamed, you cannot ignore the contributions of diet. Number 3, deficiencies in phytonutrients. Here's another topic that always comes up. I'll always get some trolls in my videos talking about how paleo diets work and how carnivore diets fix every problem under the sun. And this type of thinking has been around for quite a while. Remember the Atkins diet or even Weight Watchers? The reasons these diets work is that they avoid sugar and processed carbs mostly. So most of the benefits of, say, a carnivore diet can be attributable to the low glycemic index of the foods themselves. It also helps that the foods cannot ferment in the belly. So there are some useful elements to these diets. The problem, however, that I see is that a meat-only diet is not as helpful as, say, a phytonutrient diet. And I'll get into why in just a second. Typically, when we talk about nutrition, we look at the macronutrients. Phytonutrients are molecular compounds found primarily in plants and fungi that exert a strong positive influence on human health. So remember I said earlier that avoiding sugar and processed carbs is important. Well, most of the benefit that comes from paleo diets and carnivore diets are due to the low glycemic index of these diets. They also don't have a lot of fermentable elements, but the huge drawback and the reason these diets can create problems long-term is that they are generally devoid of phytonutrients. And there are 8 main subgroups of phytonutrients that you should be aware of. These include terpenes, phenols, chlorophyll, thiocyanate, phytoenzymes, phytooils, prebiotics, and alkaloids. So imagine studying these phytonutrients in a systematic manner and then putting them together into a diet plan. Well, that's exactly what I did. And it's called the Phytonutrient Diet, or Phyto Diet for short, and you can find the primer on Amazon just by searching my name in the Phyto Diet primer. The Phyto Diet, in my opinion, provides a more useful framework for approaching food choices because meal plans are based on maximizing phytonutrients in the diet. Also, it doesn't necessarily exclude meat or animal products, so for everyone that thinks that it's a vegan or exclusively plant-based, well, you're wrong, because there are plenty of plant-based foods that are unhealthy and can cause inflammatory diseases to worsen. Instead of looking at large classes of foods indiscriminately, like plant-based or carnivore or animal-based, instead of assigning these wide, overly broad labels to the diet, I like to use phytonutrients as a way to judge whether a food is helpful or harmful. And I provide this framework to my clients when they're making their food choices. It is very, very important to customize parts of these diets to each individual to achieve the best results. But we do see that the diet itself is capable of solving major illnesses because it supports healthy microbial colonies in the gut. Some of these slides that you just saw were from a talk that I gave at Stanford University on the topic of phytonutrition. So this is an area that's getting a lot of attention, a lot of press, and I routinely get asked questions about my phyto diet and how it works. Number 4, ignoring stress and trauma. Canadian physician Gabor Mate has famously stated that stress and trauma are the root cause of autoimmune inflammation and digestive dysfunction. In his book, The Myth of Normal, he says that some authors believe that it's the main cause. I can tell you from personal experience from working with clients that this is almost always the case. I ask a few basic questions to screen for this. I ask, are there any unmet needs in your life? Unmet needs can include things like time spent in nature, rest and relaxation, sleep, intimacy, physical activity, creative artistic expression, opportunities to eat healthy food. When I ask them about these unmet needs, nearly everyone I speak to, 100% of the people I speak to, have at least 1 or 2. Now, the follow-up question I ask is, what is preventing you from fulfilling that unmet need? And usually it's some type of obligation. Either they say I have to work, or I have to care for my kids, or an elderly relative, or I have these social, financial, family obligations. So basically what this means is that they spend the majority of their day doing things that they have to do, which means that they ignore their own needs and some of the things that they want to do. They base their entire day on avoiding negative consequences and fulfilling their obligations and pleasing other people at their own expense. And this can be dangerous. So why is this called trauma? It seems like what we just discussed is basically everyone in this world. Well, Gabor Mate differentiates trauma with a lowercase t, small t trauma, and trauma with an uppercase T or big T trauma. Big T trauma can be things like abuse, neglect, physical assault, or death of a loved one. But small t trauma can be from seemingly ordinary life experiences that slowly teach the individual to ignore and dissociate from their own needs. And unfortunately, many people, even ones that are well-adjusted and successful, deal with this. In the Mind Gut Immunity Clinic, we recently integrated a trauma and stress awareness tool that allows people to identify these issues and take action on them to see results quickly. We also provide a supportive resource to help people achieve and overcome these issues in a reasonable time frame. Number 5, poor sleep. Now, with regards to stress and unmet needs, many people do not get proper restorative sleep. Their sleep may be interrupted, or they wake up frequently, and we have an entire module dedicated to optimizing sleep so that stress can be more easily managed throughout the day. Even one day of bad rest can lead to several days of increased inflammation. So it's important that you do an inventory and really track how much restful sleep that you're getting. People with poor sleep patterns have elevated inflammatory cytokines, which makes autoimmune inflammation and digestive dysfunction worse. Number 6, sedentary lifestyle. Also along the theme of unmet needs, lack of physical activity and exercise is a missed opportunity. Every time we exercise, our bodies release cell signaling molecules and hormones that heal tissue. These beneficial chemicals also block inflammation. For example, people that exercise regularly have lower levels of TNF-alpha long term. IL-6 and TNF-alpha are cell signaling molecules you can measure in the blood that predict whether the body will have a dysfunctional response versus a healthy response. In fact, these cytokines are involved in a large number of chronic diseases. In fact, one of the most potent inhibitors of TNF-alpha is exercise, and people with sedentary lifestyles unfortunately have higher levels. And here's a study that looks at just that. Not only that, we also see that exercise helps promote a healthy microbiome. And here's another study that looks at that. You may be thinking, with all that fatigue and sometimes with aching and pain, how can you exercise? And the answer is you adapt. You create a training regimen that is personalized to your abilities, and you stick with it consistently. Sometimes it's identifying abilities and expanding on a set of maneuvers and motions that do not create a lot of stress on the joints or nerves. Sometimes it's slower, more deliberate workouts to increase muscle tone. Usually when we see people in the clinic with limitations, we work around them to help achieve success. In the Mind Gut Immunity Clinic, we believe in reversing the root causes of irritable bowel syndrome to achieve lasting results. We find solutions to inflammation without the use of medications, and with the help of coaching and expert medical review, we can dedicate real effort towards improvement and specifically optimize diet, digestion, sleep, stress, and exercise. These are the major areas that contribute to IBS and make inflammatory bowel disease worse. Now, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and share. Also, if someone you know has IBS or Candida or SIBO or leaky gut and could find this video helpful, be sure to let them know. I put out a lot of information about irritable bowel syndrome and how to reverse the condition naturally without medication. So hit the subscribe button for additional content from the Mind Gut Immunity Clinic. And until next time, I'm Dr. Dasri.